Hello, I'm Victoria Barbella. Today I will be talking about the Allegory of the Cave written by Plato, as well as The Will to Believe, which was written by William James. To begin, the Allegory of the Cave focuses primarily on human perception and how our perceptions do not define truth. Plato implies that as humans we are biased and we apply our individual biases to what we believe. Perceive, not believe. He makes a point to recognize that two human beings can experience the same situation or experience and yet take away a completely different meaning from it. So, in his example of the prisoners in the cave, all of the prisoners in the cave are convinced that shadowiness is the only reality until one prisoner is convinced otherwise when he escapes and finds the sun. He had the tangible evidence of the sun, whereas the other prisoners, when he went back to tell them, did not have tangible evidence of the sun, therefore they could not believe it, and their perception of shadowiness was just what they believed, and that was their only truth to their perception, was that sun was the only state that existed. Moreover, the will to believe argues the lawfulness of voluntary faith as well as it being acceptable to adopt a faith voluntarily. James mentions a genuine choice. Any choice that is genuine must be alive, forced, or momentous. It's important to state that a faith can only be adopted if it is a live option. A live option is just something that appeals to us. Contrary to a live option, a faith cannot be adopted if the option is dead. A dead option is basically just something that we do not see as a feasible idea, and therefore it has no possibility of being real to us. James, throughout this piece, questions, how do we just believe something, some claim? He argues that one does not just choose their beliefs, but rather one just has them. And through live and dead options, James concludes that our beliefs are not modifiable at will. Our opinions are not modifiable at will. And that's a pretty big central point to this whole piece. But he really just goes on to say that we obtain a belief and don't really know why, and this is just because we accept what we've been told, which is fine. So the views of these philosophers are worth knowing, mainly because they provide comfort to us, if that makes any sense. It's kind of like reassurance, both of them. But Plato assures us that we have nothing to lose in challenging certain ideas. And I think that's helpful because he affirms that if one could possibly prove a challenging idea wrong, the initial idea becomes stronger. And if challenging the idea in attempts to prove it wrong ends up being right, it's worthwhile because now our perception of reality is closer to the truth through those findings. Challenging an idea will never be a waste of time, and we will always benefit something from it. William James goes on to provide us reassurance in the fact that we can have a better outcome through having a belief, rather than having a disbelief or a suspension of judgment. And belief doesn't really depend on truth. So I think that's really reassuring to us. So concepts from the two philosophers that share similarity are Plato's point of perception and William James's concept of dead options. So just as dead options are unable to appeal to somebody as a real possibility, the sun being a real thing did not appeal to the prisoners in the cave. Basically, they couldn't see it being real because they didn't know anything else existed. But it's a dead option. Anything outside of shadowiness is a dead option to them. And that can be applied to the two pieces, like the similarity. Also, it ties into the fact that our opinions are not just modifiable at will. So Plato's prisoners cannot modifiably change their will of believing in anything more than shadowiness. Like, yeah. And so while Plato and William James have ideas that can be related to one another, not that they're necessarily related, they just can be related to one another, the two philosophers hold different epistemological views. Basically, there are two views in epistemology, and that is empiricism or rationalism. So Plato believes in rationalism, and that is the idea that our knowledge begins in the mind, whereas James believes in empiricism, which is the idea that our knowledge begins in experience. So this just implies that the two philosophers saw differently how we obtain knowledge, though many more philosophers and people in general believe that we gain knowledge through the experience of life, making the population of empiricists much higher than that of rationalists. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you learned something from it, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.